I got interested in Evelyn Dunbar because my mother was in the Women's Land Army, and I'd listened to her becoming very animated, telling stories about her experiences. And so I started to think about, well, if these women's stories aren't captured, then they'll be lost. And that then led me to the paintings of Evelyn Dunbar. And that lovely moment there where she's got her arm round her, and who knows what she's saying, but they're obviously sharing something. She actually became the only salaried woman war artist, and there were 37 salaried artists, so this really was unique. She was well suited to the task, given that the aims of the War Artist Scheme was to provide a documentary record of war in all its aspects. From a very early age, she'd had this interest in nature. And in fact, one of her first paintings is called Winter Garden, which is of the garden that she knew and loved and that she regularly tended. And you can see the shrubs, the trees, and she would make meticulous notes about their cultivation, their habits. And I think that was then reflected in her understanding of land girls working out in all elements. She felt at home with them. I think you can see in the paintings there is an empathy there. She doesn't romanticise what those women were doing. She captured the hard work, the loneliness. It's not glamorised. The Women's Land Army hostel painting, I think, is representative of her style, the way she's captured that feeling of land girls being in almost like a boarding school, the way they're queuing up patiently to get their food in the hostel, and even though you're looking at the backs of them, that feeling of friendship, and friendships that were built up and lasted a lifetime. And in fact, many of the land girls I've spoken to in my research, they remember these times fondly. And look back at it as some of the best moments in their life. And I think Dunbar captures some of that feeling. Evelyn Dunbar won a scholarship to the Royal College of Art, and then when she'd finished, she embarked on her first major commission at Brockley School in Hilly Fields near Lewisham. And this was under the guidance of her tutor from the Royal College of Art, Charles Marney. And this was a project that they worked on together for 3 years. They've been described as some of the greatest murals within England of the 20th century, and I think you can see that. There is an accuracy to it. It's that attention to detail that comes through in all her work. Here is one of the preliminary oil sketches that Evelyn Dunbar did for the Brockley mural. These two figures at the end here were her older sisters, who were the models. And we can see here's the school at the top of Hilly Fields. And these sketches here later on become schoolboys who were attending the grammar school. This is clearly work in progress, but it shows even here that attention to detail, to wanting to get things in the right place. In the finished work, there is a church which during the war was actually bombed and is no longer there. So it shows again the value of this kind of documentary work. She did a gardener's diary for Country Life, and this is full of, again, little drawings which were taken from her own garden, and in fact she modelled some of the figures on her two gardeners. This was all good preparation for her work in the Second World War, when she actually was involved in the drawings for a book of farmcraft. This was a book that grew out of her time at Sparsholt, when she met Michael Greenhill, who was a tutor to the land girls. They worked together on this book, which has a series of images of how to do things. And what they also do is illustrate how not to do it. It actually sold over 4,000 copies when it was published in 1942. The Land Girl and the Bale Bull is an interesting work because we have the land girl positioned in the foreground. She's looking very heroic, she's looking very strong, she's holding the bucket there, and there's the bull to the side of her. And in fact, she describes that as an imaginative painting. So I think there's perhaps less of the realism that there might be in some of her other paintings. Her work was subject to censorship like other war artists, so her work would have to be approved. But I think what they did do was to capture the British spirit, that this is our country, we're fighting for it, we're doing our bit on the land. The land girls were fighting the battle of the fields. She was determined to develop her own style, and I think we see that in the paintings. There's that sort of quirky sort of style. You get a sense of her humour, particularly in the painting The Fish Queue. It's a lovely long painting, and there's these people waiting very patiently outside the fish shop, and then above the shop it says something like, I don't know, fish always available, and of course it isn't. I think her work, it has been neglected. It deserves to be seen alongside some of her contemporaries like the Nashes, Stanley Spencer. It needs to be re-looked at and re-examined in the context of 20th century British art.